Watch more programs like this on cable and stream with PCN Select. Subscribe at PCNTV.com.
Dr. Oz, who's running for the U.S. Senate. Dr. Oz has been a television host and author. He began his medical career with Presbyterian Hospital in New York City, and he's currently an attending physician at New York Presbyterian Columbia Medical Center. Dr. Oz also serves as Professor Emeritus at Columbia University. Dr. Oz earned a bachelor's degree from Harvard, and he earned both an MD and MBA from the University of Pennsylvania, from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and the Wharton School. Dr. Oz lives in Bryn Athyn with his wife, Lisa. They have 4 adult children and 4 grandchildren. Please, folks, join me in welcoming live on this stage, Dr. Oz.
Thank you very much, sir. Oh my goodness. Thank you all for being here. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll get into some of the specifics about energy. I've had a remarkable life living the American dream, in part because my father was born on a dirt floor in a faraway land, knew the only way out of that farming community was to get an education, got a scholarship, and when he was in medical school, America recruited him. And he got to our shores, and he realized if you plant the seed in the American soil, it will prosper. If you work hard as you can to serve America, to help Americans, you get to become one. And so that belief in the American dream was instilled in me. And I spent my whole life doing just that, working as hard as I could. Grew up just south of Philadelphia, went to graduate school at Wharton and Penn Med because I wanted to understand healthcare finance. And I started making these small little devices. Much as you would develop a new way of getting something out of the ground, I was fixing heart valves in a less invasive, more effective way. Reduced the chance of dying in half at half the cost. Is that a pretty good deal? I think so, right? Took 15 years to get it through the FDA. A bureaucratic morass continually slowed down innovation. We got through it, but there was no benefit to that having happened. Along the way, I began learning a fair amount about how you innovate in America. And then, as I was making a TV show, which had become the most popular health show in the world for 100 years, and in 100 countries, well, not that old, but I learned something important. If you focus on empowering people to be the major drivers in their own lives, they like that. People want agency over their future. And so I began thinking that same idea should be done in the political world. Empower the voters, give them autonomy, give them freedom. So much of what you're trying to do in the energy sector. And then COVID hit. Now, when COVID hit, something very important happened that's directly relevant to your industry. When COVID hit, we mixed politics and medicine. And when that happens, all you get left is politics. You crush the actual innovative medicine part away. Doctors stopped being able to advise on what they would do for COVID. We began thinking there's only one way to solve a terrible pandemic, and it didn't involve asking people their opinion. And so when you say follow the science, you're doing the opposite. The weaponization of science created a huge fracture within America as people didn't like what they were hearing and they didn't have the freedom to say what they were seeing. Now, it didn't just affect what happened during the medical treatment of COVID. It was also apparent in our schools, where more and more we were told that the science told us to teach kids certain things at certain ages, when there isn't data of that nature. But perhaps the worst place that we saw the weaponization of science is in what you're doing, in energy. When there's a dishonest narrative about the Green New Deal that you're all dealing with every day, and that I've had to address in my campaign since we started, because I've been actively engaged in the energy sector. I've joined field workers wearing hard hats. I've been with industry leaders who come from all over the country. And I sit down to have coffee in a diner when I'm campaigning, and the waitress knows energy policy. I mean, everybody here is aware. And I know what we're asking for. Like my clip, if regulators give us a predictable framework and a timeline, right, you can invest. You can offer long-scale, long-term, big-scale projects. I'm here to tell you the hard truth. And I'm going to come back to this message, but I want you to hear it early on. The radical left in our country, epitomized by my opponent in this race, does not want to work with you. Many want to destroy you, purely based on radical ideology, and it's not based on science. That's a problem because you can't convince people when it's ideological. They have poisoned the way we talk about energy. They've silenced you. They've shamed you from speaking up and defending your industry. Energy, as you know, it brings people out of poverty all over the world. It drives economic growth. It advances science and technology, like I'm involved in as a doctor. My devices, my clips, they're all made of product that you guys are bringing out of the ground. American energy companies are a model for the world of cutting-edge technologies to ensure the safety of your workers. Who does it better? Who protects the environment better than you do? So let me break this down into a couple categories. Let me start with emissions. Again, I'm a scientist, so I'll try to bring that framework to this, but I want to also highlight the political ramifications because that's what's going to be discussed for the next 40 days every single day. The USA, our country, leads all countries, the entire European Union, in emissions reductions since 2005, something you all know, but no one else seems to know it. It's made possible to a large extent by the natural gas industry, right? Not by the renewable products that are out there. Right? You've decreased your emissions by about 1 billion tons, if I did my homework right. China increased its emissions by nearly 5 billion tons. India by over 1 billion tons too. So let me put it this way. India and China together have increased their emissions 6 times more than we've reduced our emissions. Something that seems to be top secret. Switching to natural gas has been the planet's most effective green mega project, dwarfing every other effort out there to make green dominant in our country. You deserve applause. You've reduced emissions, you've helped the environment, you've enhanced national security. So I'm going to give you a stat that was taught to me by one of your members, Toby Rice, early on when I was still collecting information. I should point out my son-in-law worked in the energy industry until he was recruited to work in the Trump administration. So I had an in-house tutor. But Toby said something that some of you have heard, but I'm going to emphasize it because I've used it on the campaign trail frequently. If we could get our natural gas to the coast, right, and help other countries use it as they produce energy, it will be the benefit every year for 20 years of same equivalent of electrifying every vehicle in America, plus putting a solar panel on every rooftop in America, plus doubling wind energy production. All together every year for 20 years. That's a pretty good deal, don't you think? When I tell that to lay audiences, they're stunned. Opponents of your industry, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter recently that had to be rebutted. John Fetterman continues to make charges around the industry being a stain on Pennsylvania. They charge you with creating problems that you didn't create, like, for example, the energy crisis that we're in right now. Then they threaten you and blame you. Right? John Fetterman signed a document asking for a moratorium. And then when the prices went up recently, in reaction, he said, we want to prosecute energy executives because of profiteering. They don't seem interested in compromise or in seeking pragmatic solutions. They will sacrifice your industry. The millions of well-paying jobs all across the country that either you provide directly or indirectly. The hundreds of millions of folks that you empower every day by giving them power. So let me offer my diagnosis of America. We are sleepwalking into the crisis that Europe is experiencing right now. We are being conned into a policy that will destroy our earnings and our savings. And we have to protect ourselves. You have to protect yourselves. You have to come off the sidelines. And when there's a campaign like mine with 2 stark options, you need to define where you are and tell people in your life how important this decision is. So let me tip a couple examples you could speak to. Pretty obvious ones that, again, that woman in a diner serving me coffee would know as well. Blocked pipelines. The top 6 blocked pipeline projects equate to about 7 billion cubic feet of natural gas flow per day, delivering about a quarter of their potential production from the wells. Think about that. All that stifled opportunity to bring natural gas up that could help us. Projects that do not require massive subsidies, projects that are not based on special favors or pork or any wishful thinking. You don't need government there. In fact, quite the opposite. You need to do what I was told to do recently. I was at a diner up here in Erie couple weeks ago, and the woman had just bought the diner, and I asked her, what can I do if I'm the U.S. Senator to help you? And she looked at me very drolly, and she said, get out of my way. That's what we want the U.S. government to do oftentimes on these issues, because they don't have the ability to micromanage something that's run well through the private sector. These pipeline delays, again, caused by rules that sometimes don't seem sensible, cause millions of metric tons of unnecessary emissions to continue every single day around the world. We're hurting ourselves under the guise of helping ourselves. Why isn't every environmentalist in America up in arms over this? Let me shift to the second big area, permitting and regulation, like when I developed my little clip, that life-saving device. What took so long? We have federal subsidies out there that are not the solution, and more of them isn't going to make it better. States like California already produce too much renewable power at times, and when they can't store it, right, and they don't need it, what do they do with it, right? It gets wasted. And they don't have enough energy when they desperately need it. Pennsylvania plays an important role in stabilizing power production and consumption in the mid-Atlantic region. We can be bigger even. We cannot allow terrible policies to turn every state into the problems that California is now facing. And we don't want to copy Europe. Politicizing FERC is not the solution either. It's not going to help our energy crisis in America. And let me turn my attention to a recent act, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which doesn't actually do that, obviously, but what it does do is deepen our country's energy crisis. For a couple reasons, I won't go into detail because you know this area well, but it incentivizes us to shut down reliable power plants and replace them with unreliable substitutes. It resurrects these harmful tax credits that pay utilities to shut down reliable natural gas plants. It does not simplify the regulations as we need them to be simplified around new nuclear and natural gas plants. And that unfortunately means that we're going to have unreliable wind and solar as the only game in town at a time we can't afford that. Right? At scale, they require significant investment in battery storage. I was up in Reading, Pennsylvania, visiting one of the major producers of batteries in this country, largest supplier to the Department of Defense, and a company called Enersys. Wonderful, beautiful, big facility. But no one is willing to admit what they told me, which is there are immense challenges facing battery manufacturers in America. They get 87% of their lithium from China. In fact, nearly all the lithium cells come from China, which is a national security threat to us. This new bill does nothing to jumpstart projects that will help in mining these critical minerals. Quite the opposite. It's very, very difficult for us to catch up with the current rules. Now, if COVID taught us one thing, and it taught us a lot, but one thing for sure is we cannot offshore critical manufacturers' products. You cannot offshore essential items to this country. The subsidies hidden in this bill are shocking, and the American people deserve to know. I'll give you an example that I just learned. It calls for a 2/3 subsidy for new wind turbines. That's pretty hefty. When taxpayers are paying 2/3 of the price of something that's being purchased for a green source, it's not effective at supporting the market. Less reliable power is going to drive up the cost of electricity, and we'll be paying for it. I'll go through a couple more reasons quickly. We raise taxes on energy at a time when Pennsylvania and the country are feeling the pain of rising costs of everything. These higher federal royalty payments aren't helpful for us. You know, these methane fees, a Superfund tax that impacts today's producers for past problems. We've got reasons ranging from requiring more power from people who can't deliver it, and funding of the EPA without holding it accountable. Remember, the EPA continues to force the shutdown of reliable power plants without any plan that I can see to backfill it with equally reliable sources. And we need more funding, right, for the energy plans and less funding to anti-energy activists. Pursuit of environmental justice, as it's called, is a problem because I don't know what that means. I'm not sure they know what it means. And it has national security implications. Every single day, we allow petty bureaucracy and misplaced ideology to dictate our energy policy in America. It makes everyone less safe. And when I look at the financial institutions that unfairly penalize energy companies because they're being squeezed to do so, it brings pain to me. Our allies in Europe are going to face their most challenging winter, maybe since World War II. But we have everything we need in America. I'm so optimistic. If you want to feel good about this country, go campaign in Pennsylvania. We can solve our problems with what we've got here. #1 natural gas producer in the world, right? Hundreds of years of untapped reserves, robust agriculture, manufacturing industries, all thriving off that energy. Expansion of them and the energy industry can be supercharged, right? And if we have inexpensive, reliable energy, we can go everywhere we want to go in terms of creativity, innovation, with a protected environment and protected economy. and our country being protected as well. State-of-the-art technology will ensure that we continue to innovate and maximize the protection of our environment without destroying the well-being of our people. Now, let me leave you with a couple ideas. We must change the way we talk about energy in America. You have to help lead that. I'll be in it as well. You send me to Washington. One thing I'm good at is speaking boldly about complicated ideas in a way that makes them accessible. America will get this message. But you are the tip of the spear. You have to deliver it to your friends and family. We are at the center of a culture war, whether you like it or not. So here's how I want you to help me. First of all, Mark Hanna's here. Mark, stand up wherever you are. He's a flight risk, but he's here. Mark Hanna has been, from day one, supportive of this campaign. He's our energy chair. He'll arise somewhere. My wife, by the way, and my son-in-law, John, are over in that table, so Mark's around there somewhere, mulling around. On October the 17th, we're having a big event in Pittsburgh. Toby Rice is going to help lead that event. Many of you are on the host committee. Please come if you can. Number two, I put a lot of money into this campaign, and we've raised a lot of money, and we've gotten a lot of money from the National Republican Party. The Democratic Party is raising immense amounts of money, coming primarily from outside this Commonwealth, from people who just want the 51st seat, who don't know that much about my opponent. They don't know that he wants to release 1/3 of all prisoners and that he wants to get out as many as he can. That's what he said when he's asked about his major goal. Releasing murderers, saving life sentences over the desires of their families is a problem for me and for the Commonwealth. Desiring to have an open border so that fentanyl flows effortlessly into this country while cartels prosper, and at the same time asking that we legalize all drugs and create heroin injection sites has led to the biggest drug open markets anywhere in America, here in Pennsylvania. We can't have these. These are issues that are beyond energy, but similarly radical ideas are percolating in his mind, because he's not a traditional Democrat, he's a far-left Democrat. You have to be vocal about the stark differences in our two candidacies. And being vocal means you get people to think about this race. You don't have to tell them who to vote for, just get them to be aware of what both candidates represent. Get me employees, union workers, folks that have not really focused in on the race, and have the conversation. You're much more influential than I will be, because they're your friends. Get as many of these folks to participate and contribute as possible. And you as individuals, if you have the ability, you and your families, please go to droz.com and support our effort. It's symbolic. I know we're raising a lot of money, but the ability for me to say that we've gotten a bunch more people, especially in this industry, supportive, even if it's $10, if you give a campaign $10, you're going to be rooting for that campaign. You'll talk to friends. You'll get more voters. I'm looking at, over 1,000 people here. If each of you were to speak to a dozen folks, right, that's 12,000 individuals who have feel strongly about how this race is going to turn out. I won the primary with 951 votes. So 12,000 is a big number for me. Please join our event, please join our movement, and please be vocal for your own industry. Be proud of what you've done. You deserve it. I believe in you. God bless you.